The autumn breeze whispered through the grand windows of the evergreen mountain resort, carrying with it the scent of pine and approaching winter. Olivia Carter balanced a loaded serving tray against her hip, her 7-month pregnant belly making the simple task a delicate dance. The pristine dining room buzzed with the quiet murmur of wealthy guests, the clink of fine china, and the subtle rustle of crisp white tablecloths. She paused briefly, catching her reflection in one of the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her vintage-inspired, uniform dress stretched across her growing belly, and dark circles shadowed her honey-colored eyes. The double shift was taking its toll, but the tips from the resort's wealthy clientele would help with the mounting medical bills. "Table 7 needs fresh coffee," Monica, the head waitress, called out as she rushed past with her own tray of elaborate breakfast plates. "And Mr. Miller's at table 12. He's been asking for you specifically." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Richard Miller, the resort's owner, was known for his exacting standards and cold demeanor. She'd managed to avoid direct interaction with him during her 8 months of employment, but her luck had apparently run out. The coffee pot felt heavier than usual as she made her way through the maze of tables. Her sensible shoes whispered against the plush carpet, each step careful and measured. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the dining room floor. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself, remembering her boyfriend's words from that morning. "One step at a time, Liv." The thought of Nathan brought a small smile to her face. He'd left early for another mysterious business meeting, promising to return with celebratory news. Their tiny apartment above the local bookstore wasn't much, but it was home, and soon it would welcome their little one. Lost in thought, Olivia didn't notice the guest who suddenly pushed his chair back. Her hip caught the edge of the chair, throwing her off balance. Time seemed to slow as the coffee pot tilted, its steaming contents arcing through the air in a perfect, terrible trajectory. The splash of hot coffee against expensive fabric was followed by a moment of absolute silence. Richard Miller stood slowly, his pressed white shirt now stained a damning brown. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, fixed on Olivia with an intensity that froze her in place. At 56, he carried himself with the rigid posture of a man accustomed to command, his silver hair and tailored suit a testament to wealth earned through uncompromising standards. Olivia's voice caught in her throat as she fumbled for napkins. "Mr. Miller, I'm so sorry. Please let me help." "Don't." His voice cut through the air like a blade. "You've done quite enough." The dining room had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on their tableau of humiliation, the powerful hotel magnate and the clumsy pregnant waitress, a scene worthy of a modern tragedy. "This is exactly why people like you never rise above their station," Miller continued, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "You can't even manage the simple task of carrying a coffee pot without creating a disaster." Olivia's cheeks burned as she tried to maintain her composure. "Sir, it was an accident. I can pay for the dry cleaning." "With what?" His laugh was sharp and cruel. "Your minimum wage salary? Or perhaps you'll dip into your trust fund." The sarcasm dripped like poison. "People like you remain at the bottom because that's where you belong. You lack the basic competence required for even the simplest tasks." The baby kicked as if sensing her distress. Olivia's hand instinctively moved to her belly, a protective gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Miller. His eyes narrowed, disgust evident in the curl of his lip. "Monica," he called out, not taking his eyes off Olivia. "Escort Ms. Carter to HR. Her employment is terminated, effective immediately." "But Mr. Miller," Monica stepped forward, her face pale. "She's 7 months. That's not my concern." He straightened his ruined jacket. "Incompetence doesn't deserve special treatment regardless of circumstance." The walk to HR was a blur. Olivia barely registered signing the termination papers or turning in her name tag. The crisp autumn air hit her face as she stepped outside, and only then did she allow the tears to fall. The drive home was dangerous through her tears, but muscle memory guided her to the small bookstore that had become her sanctuary. The apartment above it wasn't much. A one-bedroom walk-up with temperamental heating, but it was home. Nathan's, beat-up truck was already in the parking lot, a rare sight this early in the day. She found him pacing in their tiny living room, his tall frame casting shifting shadows on the walls. His dark blonde hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, a nervous habit she'd come to recognize. "Nathan?" Her voice cracked. He turned, his face softening immediately at the sight of her tears. In 3 long strides, he crossed the room and enveloped her in his arms. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with coffee. "What happened?" His voice rumbled in his chest. "Is it the baby?" "I lost my job," she whispered into his shirt. "I spilled coffee on a guest and he humiliated me in front of everyone before firing me." Nathan's body tensed. "Who?" "The owner, Richard Miller." The sudden stillness in Nathan's body made her pull back to look at his face. All color had drained from his features, his blue eyes wide with an emotion she couldn't quite read. "Nathan?" She touched his cheek, concerned by his reaction. "What's wrong?" He stepped away from her, moving to the window that overlooked the quiet street below. His reflection in the glass showed a man haunted by something far deeper than her story could explain. "I should have told you this a long time ago," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Richard Miller. He's my father." The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of a car horn and the gentle tick of their second-hand wall clock. Olivia stood frozen, one hand on her belly, watching as Nathan continued to stare out the window, his shoulders rigid, with 5 years of unspoken pain. In that moment, their small apartment felt like it was closing in around them, the walls drawing closer with the weight of secrets finally spoken. Outside, the autumn wind rattled the window pane, carrying with it the promise of a storm approaching, both literal and metaphorical. The baby kicked again, a reminder of the innocent life that would soon enter this complicated world. Olivia watched as Nathan's reflection in the window grew dimmer with the fading daylight, his silence speaking volumes about the storms that lay ahead. Richard Miller stood at the window of his penthouse suite, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The coffee stain on his shirt had dried, a dark reminder of the morning's events. In his hand, he held a crystal tumbler of scotch, the same brand his son used to steal sips from when he thought no one was watching. The room around him spoke of wealth and success. Original hardwood floors, handcrafted furniture, and floor-to-ceiling, windows offering a panoramic view of the Rockies. But tonight, the luxury felt hollow, echoing with the ghosts of family dinners and holiday celebrations long past. His phone buzzed on the desk, another message from his executive assistant about the upcoming board meeting. 5 years ago, Nathan would have been preparing to take his place at that table. Now the Miller Hotel empire had everything except an heir. "Your son's girlfriend is requesting her final paycheck be processed immediately," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Should I handle it personally?" The crystal tumbler shattered against the wall. "What did you just say?" Richard's voice was deadly quiet. "The waitress from this morning, sir. Our background check shows she's living with Nathan Miller. Your son." Richard sank into his leather chair, the weight of revelation pressing against his chest. The pregnant waitress, she was carrying his grandchild. His son had been here, in his town, all this time. Memories flooded back unbidden. Nathan at 7, proudly showing off his first lost tooth. At 12, winning the state swimming championship. At 17, standing tall in his graduation robes, his mother beaming beside them both. And at 20, those same blue eyes filled with disgust as he walked away forever. The intercom buzzed again. "Sir, about the paycheck?" "Double it," he managed. "Triple it, whatever it takes." "Yes, sir, and there's something else. We found his business proposal." A manila folder appeared on his desk minutes later. Inside was a detailed plan for a specialty coffee shop. Hope & Co. and the financial projections were solid, the market research impeccable. His son had learned well despite everything. "He's been trying to secure funding," his assistant explained. "The banks are hesitant without collateral." Richard closed the folder, his hands trembling slightly. Find out everything. Where they live, what they need. Any medical bills for the pregnancy. Everything. Across town in their small apartment, Nathan and Olivia sat in the gathering darkness. Neither had moved since his confession, the truth hanging heavy between them. "Talk to me," Olivia finally whispered. "Please." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father's it would have pained him to know. "What do you want me to say? That I'm the runaway son of a billionaire? That I changed my name and walked away from everything because I couldn't stand to look at him after what he did? What did he do?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Nathan moved to their tiny kitchen, mechanically going through the motions of making coffee, the one habit he couldn't break even now. "My mom died when I was 20, he began, his voice rough. "Cancer, fast and brutal. Dad, he fell apart, started staying late at the office, drinking more, and then I found out why." The coffee maker gurgled, filling the silence. "He was sleeping with my mom's best friend. Had been for months even before Mom got sick. When I confronted him, he didn't even deny it, just said, 'The world doesn't stop turning because we're grieving, son.'" Olivia crossed the room, wrapping her arms around him from behind. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the years of pain coiled tight beneath his skin. "I left that night, changed my name from Miller to Matthews, used my trust fund to put myself through business school, then never touched another penny of his money. I wanted to build something of my own, prove I could succeed without his name or his wealth." "The coffee shop," Olivia said softly. "Yeah." He turned to face her, his eyes filled with a desperate kind of pride. "I was going to tell you everything once it was up and running. Prove to you, to everyone, that I'm nothing like him." "But now I've lost us the deposit money," Olivia's voice cracked. "The money we've been saving." "Hey, no." Nathan cupped her face in his hands. "This isn't your fault. None of it is." A knock at the door made them both jump. Through the frosted glass they could see an expensive suit and the silhouette of a folder. "Mr. Matthews? I represent the Evergreen Mountain Resort's legal department. We have some papers regarding Ms. Carter's termination." Nathan's jaw clenched. "He's trying to buy us off." "Don't open it," Olivia pleaded. But they both knew the folder would be slipped under their door, would lie there like a landmine waiting to explode their carefully constructed life. Across town, Richard Miller poured another scotch, staring at old family photos on his phone. Nathan's graduation, family, vacations, the last Christmas before Catherine got sick. His son's face grew progressively colder in each image until the final one, Nathan walking out the door, duffel bag over his shoulder, never looking back. "I found him," Richard whispered to Catherine's image on his desk. "But I think I've lost him all over again." The mountain wind howled outside his window, carrying with it the scent of approaching winter. Somewhere in this town, his son was holding the woman carrying his grandchild, planning a future that deliberately excluded him. The empire he'd built, every hotel and resort, every acquisition and merger, suddenly seemed meaningless. In their apartment, Nathan and Olivia finally opened the folder. Inside was not just a severance check but Nathan's business proposal, approved for full funding through an anonymous investor. "He's trying to pull me back in." Nathan's voice was tight, with anger. "Trying to control everything, just like he always has." Olivia touched the proposal with trembling fingers. All their dreams were there on paper, fully funded and ready to become reality. But the price was something neither of them was sure they could pay. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, as if reminding them that time was running out. In 2 months, their child would enter a world complicated by old wounds and new beginnings, by pride and pain and the possibility of redemption. Nathan crumpled the proposal in his fist, but Olivia caught his hand. "Wait," she said softly. Maybe this isn't about control. Maybe it's about something else entirely." Outside their window, the first snow of the season began to fall, covering the town in a blank white canvas, offering the promise of fresh starts and second chances, if only they were brave enough to take them. The scent of freshly baked cookies wafted through the hallway of the apartment building as Rose Henderson, their elderly neighbor from across the hall, knocked on Olivia and Nathan's door. At 78, she had the uncanny ability to sense when someone needed comfort, usually arriving with a plate of warm chocolate chip cookies and decades of wisdom. "I heard voices last night," she said when Olivia opened the door, her silver hair neatly styled despite the early hour. "Thought you might need these." She lifted the plate, steam still rising from the cookies. Olivia's eyes welled with tears, pregnancy hormones making her more emotional than usual. "Come in, Rose, I think I need more than cookies today." The small apartment was strewn with papers, the business proposal, financial documents, and medical bills creating a paper trail of their current crisis. Nathan had left at dawn, muttering something about meeting potential investors, his father's offer still untouched on the coffee table. Rose settled into their worn armchair, her keen eyes taking in the scene. "Money troubles?" "Life troubles," Olivia corrected, easing herself onto the couch. "Have you ever had a moment where one decision could change everything, but you're not sure if it's for better or worse?" "Honey, at my age, those moments are like old friends." Rose leaned forward, her expression serious. "Tell me." So Olivia did. She told her about Richard Miller, about Nathan's past, about the business proposal that could make their dreams come true or destroy them completely. Rose listened without interruption, occasionally nodding, her weathered hands folded in her lap. "Pride," she said finally, "is a luxury poor people can't afford and rich people can't let go of." Across town, Nathan sat in his truck outside the local bank, staring at the rejection letter in his hands. The sixth one this month. Without his father's funding, Hope & Co. would remain just a dream on paper. His phone buzzed, another text, from his father's legal team. The proposal offer would expire in 48 hours. Time was running out, just like his options. The baby's latest ultrasound photo was tucked into his sun visor. A boy. They were having a boy. Every time he looked at that grainy image, he saw a future he desperately wanted to provide, one that didn't depend on his father's money or influence. His phone rang, displaying an unknown number. "Nathan Matthews?" a familiar voice asked when he answered. "Uncle James?" Nathan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. His mother's brother, whom he hadn't spoken to since the funeral. "Your father called me," James said without preamble. "Told me everything, including about my great-nephew on the way." Nathan's throat tightened. He had no right. "He's a mess, Nate. Has been for years, but this isn't about him, is it? It's about that baby of yours and the girl you love. I won't let him control us like he controlled Mom." "Is that what you think happened?" James's voice softened. "Your mother knew about Victoria long before you did. She chose to stay, to fight for your father. She believed people could change." The revelation hit Nathan like a physical blow. "What?" "Catherine, your mother. She was the strongest person I knew. She didn't stay out of weakness. She stayed because she believed in redemption. Even at the end, she made your father promise to tell you the truth himself." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're about to become a father and you need to understand something. The sins of the father don't have to become the sins of the son." At the Evergreen Mountain Resort, Richard Miller stood in the empty dining room, staring at the table where he'd humiliated his son's girlfriend. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "Sir?" His assistant appeared at his elbow. "Your son's friend just dropped this off." It was a small envelope containing a single photograph, the ultrasound. On the back, in neat handwriting, "Your grandson, due in 8 weeks. Thought you should know. Rose Henderson." Richard's hands trembled as he sank into a chair, the image of his unborn grandson blurring through unexpected tears. Back at the apartment, Olivia was sorting through baby clothes when someone knocked. Expecting Rose again, she opened the door without checking. Richard Miller stood in her hallway, looking both powerful and somehow lost in his expensive suit. "Please," he said before she could close the door. "Just 5 minutes." Olivia's hand instinctively went to her belly. Nathan isn't here. I know. I came to see you. Against her better judgment, she stepped aside to let him in. Richard entered cautiously, his eyes taking in the modest apartment, the second-hand furniture, the carefully mended curtains, the wall of sonogram photos. I owe you an apology, he began, his voice rough. What I did, what I said that day, it was unforgivable. Why are you really here, Mr. Miller? He pulled out the ultrasound photo. Because this isn't just about Nathan and me anymore. This is about family, and I've already lost too much of that. To Olivia's shock, Richard Miller, billionaire hotel magnate, the man who had publicly humiliated her, sank to his knees. I lost my wife to cancer. I lost my son to my own mistakes. Please, his voice broke. Don't let me lose my grandson too. Let me try to fix what I've broken. The baby chose that moment to kick hard, making Olivia gasp. Without thinking, she grabbed Richard's hand and placed it on her belly. The look of wonder on his face transformed him. Gone was the cold businessman, replaced by a man feeling his grandson's movements for the first time. The apartment door opened. Nathan stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the scene before him, his father on his knees, hand on Olivia's belly, tears on his face. Nathan, Richard whispered, not moving. Son. The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. 5 years of pain, secrets and unspoken words hung in the balance. Then Rose appeared behind Nathan as if summoned by some cosmic timing. Well, she said, pushing past him with another plate of cookies. Looks like we're finally having that family meeting. The absurdity of the moment, the billionaire on his knees, the elderly neighbor with cookies, the prodigal son in the doorway, broke something in the room. Nathan let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. Mom knew, he said to his father, about Victoria. She knew, and she stayed. Richard's face crumpled. She was better than both of us. Yeah, Nathan agreed softly. She was. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. 3 generations of Miller men, connected by love, pain, and the possibility of redemption, all within the walls of a small apartment that suddenly felt like holy ground. Outside, the mountain wind carried the promise of change, while inside, a family began the delicate work of rebuilding what had been broken. The morning after Richard Miller's unexpected visit, Nathan sat at their small kitchen table, staring into his coffee cup as if it held answers to questions he wasn't ready to ask. The sounds of Olivia getting ready for a doctor's appointment filtered through their thin bathroom walls, along with the occasional muttered curse at her growing inability to bend. You're sure about this? He called out, his voice carrying a weight heavier than the question itself. The bathroom door opened, releasing a cloud of steam. Olivia emerged, her damp hair curling around her shoulders, one hand supporting her lower back. About the appointment? Pretty sure it's not optional at this point. About accepting his offer to come to the estate for dinner tonight? Olivia crossed the room, her movements slower now that she was approaching her 8th month. Rose is right. We need neutral ground to figure this out, and your childhood home. That place stopped being home a long time ago, Nathan cut in, his knuckles white around the coffee cup. Then maybe it's time to make it something new. The drive to the Miller estate that evening was tense. Nathan's old truck seemed out of place as they wound up the private road, past manicured gardens and security checkpoints. Each turn revealed another memory. The tree he'd climbed to escape dinner parties, the tennis courts where he'd learned to play, the garage that had once housed his mother's beloved vintage Mustang. You grew up here? Olivia's voice was barely a whisper as the main house came into view. The Georgian mansion stood proud against the mountain backdrop, its windows gleaming in the setting sun. Life was different then, Nathan replied, parking beside a fountain he'd once fallen into during a particularly rebellious teenage moment. Richard was waiting at the front door, looking somehow both powerful and uncertain in casual slacks and a sweater, an outfit chosen carefully to appear more approachable. The family's longtime housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, hovered anxiously behind him. You came, Richard said softly, relief evident in his voice. We came, Nathan corrected, his hand protective at Olivia's back. Mrs. Chen broke the tension by rushing forward to embrace Nathan, her tiny frame barely reaching his chest. Too skinny, she declared, pulling back to examine him, still not eating properly. For the first time that evening, Nathan's face softened into a genuine smile. Missed you too, Mrs. Chen. The interior of the house was exactly as Nathan remembered, yet somehow different. The formal living room had been transformed into a more intimate setting, with comfortable chairs arranged in a conversation circle. Family photos that had been hidden away after Catherine's death were back on display, including, Nathan noticed with a start, recent ones of him pulled from social media. Your father's been collecting them, Mrs. Chen whispered as she passed carrying a tray of appetizers. Every article about your coffee competitions, every social media post. He has a whole file. Dinner was served in the smaller family dining room rather than the formal one, another calculated choice. Mrs. Chen had prepared all of Nathan's childhood favorites, along with special pregnancy-safe versions for Olivia. I remember when you won your first barista competition, Richard said, breaking a lengthy silence. Regional finals in Denver. You were competing under Matthews, but I was there. Nathan's fork clattered against his plate. What? Back row, baseball cap. I didn't want to disturb you, but I needed to see. The revelation hung heavy in the air. Olivia reached for Nathan's hand under the table, feeling the tremors running through him. You could have said something, Nathan's voice was rough. Would you have wanted me to? The honest question caught them both off guard. Before Nathan could respond, Olivia gasped sharply, her hand flying to her belly. What's wrong? 3 voices asked in unison. Nothing, she managed through gritted teeth. Just Braxton Hicks. Dr. Romano said they'd get stronger toward the end. Dr. Romano? Richard's brow furrowed. At County General? Yes, Olivia answered, cautiously. You should be seeing Dr. Phillips at Mountain View Women's Center. She's the best high-risk pregnancy specialist in the state. We can't afford, Nathan began. I can. No. Nathan stood abruptly. We're not doing this, not again. This isn't about control, Nathan. This is about your child, my grandchild, having the best possible care. Like you had the best interests of your family in mind when you were sleeping with Mom's best friend. The words exploded in the room like shrapnel. Mrs. Chen, who had been entering with dessert, quietly retreated. Richard seemed to age years in seconds. Your mother, he said finally, was the love of my life. What I did, it wasn't about love. It was about being a coward, about running from the pain of watching her slip away. So you made sure she spent her final months knowing her husband and best friend had betrayed her? She knew long before, that son. Richard's voice cracked. She confronted Victoria first, then me. Said she'd forgive us both if we promised to tell you the truth after she was gone. She knew you'd need to hear it from me, not find out the way you did. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I was a coward. Again. I thought if I ignored it, buried myself in work, it would somehow hurt less. Instead, I lost you too. Olivia, who had been silent during the exchange, suddenly grabbed both men's arms. Hospital, she gasped. Now. But you're not due for another month. Nathan's face went pale. Tell that to your son, she managed through another contraction, because he's definitely not waiting for us to fix 30 years of family drama. The next few minutes were chaos. Mrs. Chen appeared with Olivia's coat and a packed hospital bag she'd apparently prepared, just in case. Richard was already on the phone with Dr. Phillips, pulling strings to have her meet them at the hospital. Take my car. He tossed Nathan a set of keys. It's faster than your truck. In the garage, Nathan froze. The keys belonged to his mother's restored Mustang. She would have wanted you to have it, Richard said quietly. For moments like this. The engine roared to life, its familiar purr unlocking a flood of memories. His mother teaching him to drive, family road trips, the last time he'd seen her behind the wheel before she got too sick. As they pulled out of the garage, Nathan caught a glimpse of his father in the rearview mirror, standing alone in the growing darkness. Without thinking, he hit the brakes. "Get in," he called out. "Your grandson's not waiting for us to figure this out either." Richard's face lit up with something between hope and terror as he climbed into the back seat. The Mustang's headlights cut through the gathering dusk as 3 generations of Millers, one yet to be born, headed toward a future none of them had planned, but all of them desperately needed. Behind them, Mrs. Chen smiled knowingly as she began preparing the house for a homecoming whenever it might be. Catherine's Mustang roared through the mountain roads, its headlights cutting through the darkness as Nathan navigated the familiar curves with inherited precision. In the passenger seat, Olivia breathed through contractions, her knuckles white against the leather interior. Richard Miller sat in the back, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with the hospital staff. "Dr. Phillips is already there," he reported, his voice steady despite the tension. "She's assembling her team." "I don't need a team," Olivia gritted out between contractions. "I need this baby to wait another 4 weeks." The hospital's emergency entrance blazed with light as they pulled up. Dr. Phillips, a commanding presence in surgical scrubs, was already waiting with a wheelchair and a team of nurses. 32 weeks, she noted, helping Olivia from the car. "Let's see what this little guy has planned." Nathan moved to follow, but Dr. Phillips held up a hand. "Get the car properly parked first. We'll be in labor and delivery room 304. She's in good hands." As the medical team whisked Olivia away, Nathan stood frozen, keys dangling from his fingers. The same keys his mother had once used to drive him to this very hospital for broken arms, high fevers, and eventually, her own final battle. "I'll park it," Richard offered quietly. "Go be with her." Nathan hesitated, the weight of trust hanging between them. Then, wordlessly, he pressed the keys into his father's hand and ran after Olivia. Richard watched his son disappear through the sliding doors, then slid behind the wheel of Catherine's car. Her presence seemed to linger in every detail, the slight scratch on the dashboard where her ring had caught, the worn spot on the steering wheel where her thumb had rested during long drives. "Help me fix this, Cat," he whispered to the empty car. "Help me be the father he needs right now." Up in room 304, monitors beeped steadily as Dr. Phillips examined Olivia. "Good news," she announced finally. "Your contractions are slowing. We might be able to stop this." "But?" Nathan prompted, recognizing the doctor's careful tone. "But we're seeing some concerning patterns in the baby's heart rate. I want to keep you here for observation, Olivia. At least until we're confident Junior's going to stay put a while longer." As Dr. Phillips left to order additional tests, Olivia turned to Nathan. "The medical bills. Don't." He pressed his forehead to hers. "We'll figure it out." "You know your father's already handling it." Nathan pulled back slightly. "We don't need—" "Yes, we do." Olivia's voice was firm. "Our son needs the best care available right now. Your pride isn't more important than his health." The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He sank into the chair beside her bed, running his hands through his hair, a gesture so like his father's that it would have startled him to know. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Richard stood in the doorway, holding Catherine's old, leather handbag. "Mrs. Chen sent this," he explained quickly. She said Catherine would have wanted Olivia to have it, for the hospital stay." Olivia reached for the bag with trembling hands. Inside was a collection of carefully chosen comforts, warm socks, lip balm, a soft robe, and tucked into a side pocket, a worn photo of Catherine holding newborn Nathan. "She kept this in here?" Nathan's voice cracked as he lifted the photo. "Your mother believed in being prepared," Richard said softly. "She carried that bag to every doctor's appointment, every hospital stay. Said it reminded her of what she was fighting for." The monitors beeped steadily in the background as 3 generations of Millers sat in silence, the photo bridging past and present. Hours passed. Dr. Phillips returned periodically to check Olivia's progress. The contractions gradually subsided, but the baby's heart rate remained a concern. "I'm ordering steroid shots," she announced during her midnight rounds, "to help develop his lungs, just in case he decides to make an early appearance after all." As dawn approached, Rose appeared with fresh coffee and her signature cookies. "Thought you boys might need these," she said, setting up camp in a corner chair like a guardian angel in sensible shoes. Nathan watched as his father accepted a cookie with a grateful nod. In the soft morning light, Richard looked older, more human somehow. The imperious hotel magnate was gone, replaced by a man who'd spent the night in an uncomfortable hospital chair, watching his son pace the floor. "She really knew?" Nathan asked suddenly. "About Victoria?" Richard's hand stilled around his coffee cup. "Yes. She found out about 3 months before the end. I came home one night and she was waiting in my study. She had photos, hotel receipts, said she'd suspected for weeks but needed proof. Why didn't she leave you?" I asked her the same thing. She said, Richard's voice caught. She said broken things could be fixed if people were willing to do the work, but it had to be my choice to end it, to tell you the truth. She believed in redemption, your mother, more than I deserved. But you didn't end it. I did. The night, she confronted me, but I couldn't. I couldn't face telling you. Couldn't bear to see the same disgust in your eyes that I saw in the mirror, so I lost you anyway. Olivia stirred in her sleep, drawing both men's attention. The morning sun painted her face in soft gold, one hand curled protectively over her belly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Richard continued quietly. "I don't deserve it. But that child, your son, he deserves a family, a whole one. I can't change the past, but I can try to be better for his future, if you'll let me." Before Nathan could respond, Olivia's monitors began beeping urgently. Dr. Phillips rushed in, her face grave as she checked the readings. "The baby's in distress," she announced. "We need to do an emergency C-section now." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Nurses appeared with equipment. An anesthesiologist was paged. Forms were thrust at Nathan for signing. "Wait." Olivia grabbed Richard's sleeve as they prepared to wheel her out. Promise me you'll both be here when we come back. Promise me you'll try." Richard looked at his son, seeing in him the same fear he'd felt 32 years ago when Nathan was born. "We'll be here," they promised in unison. As the doors swung shut behind Olivia's gurney, father and son stood, side by side, united by love and fear for the 2 lives being rushed to surgery. Rose appeared between them, taking each of their hands in hers. "Now," she said firmly, "we pray, and we trust, and we remember that love, real love, is always worth the work." The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows that seemed to connect the 3 figures standing vigil. Somewhere in the hospital, a new life was preparing to enter the world, bringing with it the possibility of healing what generations had broken. The surgical waiting room at Mountain View Medical Center was designed to be calming, with its soft blue walls and understated artwork. But for Nathan Matthews, every tick of the wall clock felt like a hammer against his nerves. He'd worn a path in the carpet, pacing the same route for the past 45 minutes. Richard Miller sat perfectly still, his posture rigid, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. The same position he'd maintained through Catherine's surgeries years ago. Only Rose, settled in a corner armchair with her ever-present knitting needles, seemed genuinely calm. "Did you know," Rose began, her needles clicking steadily, "that when my Henry was born he wasn't breathing?" Both men turned to look at her. "The doctors worked on him for 6 minutes, longest 6 minutes of my life. But do you know what got me through it?" She held up her knitting, the beginnings of a baby blanket in soft blue yarn. "Faith. Not just in God, but in love, in family, in the strength we find when we stand together instead of alone. A memory hit Nathan like a physical blow. His mother knitting in this same waiting room, creating blankets for the NICU while going through her own chemotherapy. Sometimes, she'd told him, helping others is the best medicine. Your mother liked to knit too, Richard said softly, as if reading Nathan's thoughts. She made blankets for every baby born to our hotel staff, said every new life deserved to be wrapped in love. I still have mine, Nathan admitted, the one she made when I was born. It's in the nursery at home. The confession hung in the air between them, a thread connecting past to present. Dr. Phillips appeared in the doorway, still in her surgical scrubs. All three stood immediately, the half-finished baby blanket falling forgotten to the floor. Congratulations, she smiled. You have a beautiful baby boy, 4 pounds, 3 ounces, small, but fighting. And Olivia? Nathan's voice cracked. She's doing well, in recovery now. The surgery went smoothly. The baby's lungs? Richard asked, medical terminology from Catherine's illness flowing back easily. He needs some help breathing right now, which is normal for 32 weeks. We've got him in the NICU on CPAP support. Would you like to see him? Nathan swayed slightly. Richard's hand shot out to steady him, and for once, Nathan didn't pull away. The NICU was a different world. Hushed voices, soft beeping monitors, and the gentle whoosh of breathing machines. Through the window, they could see a tiny figure in an incubator wrapped in sensors and tubes. He's beautiful, Richard whispered, his face pressed close to the glass. He has Catherine's nose. Nathan stared at his son, so small, yet already showing the Miller family traits. The same determined set to his jaw that Nathan saw in old photos of himself. The same slight curl to his hair that his mother had loved to smooth back. A nurse approached with surgical gowns and masks. Would you like to go in? He's stable enough for brief visits. Nathan looked at his father, seeing not the powerful hotel magnate but a man desperate to connect with his grandson. Together? Richard's eyes filled with tears. Together. Inside the NICU, the world narrowed to the small incubator and its precious occupant. The baby's chest rose and fell with each assisted breath, his tiny fingers curled into fists. You can touch him, the nurse encouraged. Through the ports here. Skin contact is important for preemies. Nathan reached in first, his large hand dwarfing his son's entire arm. The baby's fingers immediately wrapped around his father's index finger. Hey there, little guy. Nathan's voice was thick with emotion. We've been waiting for you. Richard stood back, uncertain, until Nathan stepped aside. Your turn, Grandpa. The word seemed to unlock something in Richard. He approached the incubator with trembling hands, gently touching his grandson's palm. The baby's fingers curled around his, just as they had with Nathan. He's strong, Richard managed, like his grandmother. In recovery, Olivia woke to find Rose beside her bed, the blue baby blanket taking shape in her experienced hands. The boys? She asked groggily. In the NICU with your son. Together. Rose emphasized the last word with a knowing smile. Sometimes, it takes the smallest hands to build the biggest bridges. Hours passed in a blur of medical updates and brief NICU visits. Nathan split his time between Olivia and the baby, while Richard made calls ensuring both received the best possible care. No expense was spared, no medical option unexplored. Late that night, when Olivia was finally wheeled to the NICU for her first visit, she found Nathan and Richard sitting side by side in the family room, sharing stories. He used to hide his coffee beans in his toy chest, Richard was saying. Claimed he could tell different regions apart by smell alone. At 12, Mom used to help me catalog them, Nathan added. Said if I was going to be obsessed with something, I might as well learn the science behind it. Olivia cleared her throat softly. Both men jumped up, rushing to help position her wheelchair by the incubator. He needs a name, she said, pressing her hand against the plastic barrier separating her from her son. Nathan and Richard exchanged a look. Actually, Nathan began hesitantly. I was thinking, what about Christopher? After Mom's father? Richard's breath caught. She always said, if we'd had another child. Christopher Henry, Olivia added softly, after Rose's husband too. Rose, who had appeared silently in the doorway, dropped a stitch for the first time in 40 years. Through the incubator's clear walls, baby Christopher seemed to respond to his name, his tiny face turning toward their voices. One hand reached out seeking connection while the other remained firmly gripped around his monitoring wire, as if bridging the gap between the medical technology keeping him safe and the family love drawing him home. Christopher Henry Miller. Richard tested the name carefully. Matthews, Nathan corrected automatically, then paused. Looking at his father's crestfallen expression, he added, Maybe Miller Matthews. For Mom. Outside the NICU windows, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope. Christopher's monitors beeped steadily, a rhythm like a heartbeat, counting out the moments of a new beginning. Rose resumed her knitting, the blue blanket growing beneath her fingers. Every stitch a prayer, she murmured. Every prayer a promise, every promise a bridge. In his incubator, Christopher Miller Matthews slept peacefully, unaware that his very existence had begun healing wounds that had festered for generations. His small chest rose and fell with each assisted breath, each one stronger than the last, each one bringing his family closer together. The first week of Christopher's life passed in a blur of NICU visits, medical updates, and cautious optimism. Each day brought small victories, breathing a little stronger, gaining a few precious ounces, tolerating brief periods without CPAP support. But with those victories came new challenges that tested the fragile peace between father and son. Nathan stood at the NICU window, watching Richard read to Christopher from a worn copy of Goodnight Moon, the same book Catherine had read to Nathan as a child. The sight stirred complicated emotions. Gratitude for his father's devotion to Christopher, resentment that it took a crisis to bring it out, and an aching wish that his mother could see them now. Your coffee's getting cold, Olivia said softly, wheeling herself up beside him. She was still recovering from the C-section, but had insisted on being discharged early to spend more time in the NICU. He's different with Christopher, Nathan observed, taking the coffee cup. More like he was before Mom got sick. People can change, Olivia replied, wincing slightly as she adjusted her position. Sometimes they just need a reason big enough. Inside the NICU, Richard finished the story and carefully closed the book. Christopher's vital signs had remained strong throughout the reading, a good sign according to Dr. Phillips. As Richard stood to leave, a young nurse rushed in. Mr. Miller? There's an urgent call from your office about the Singapore merger. The old Richard would have left immediately. This Richard looked at his grandson, then at the nurse. Tell them to handle it. I'm busy with something more important. Nathan's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. Later that afternoon, Richard found Nathan in the hospital cafeteria, spreading blueprints across a table. The contractor called, Nathan explained without looking up. They need final approval on the Hope and Cumber layout by tomorrow if we want to stay on schedule. Richard studied the plans over his son's shoulder, noting the careful attention to detail. You've thought of everything. The flow from counter to seating, the workspace efficiency. Catherine would have loved it. She always said a good coffee shop should feel like coming home. Nathan traced a finger along the blueprint's edge. I was thinking, maybe we could have a small reading corner with Mom's favorite books and her photo above the fireplace? Both men fell silent, remembering the portrait that had hung in Richard's study. Catherine laughing in the mountain sunshine, her dark hair wild in the wind. I had it restored, Richard said quietly. After you left, spent hours just talking to it, telling her how badly I'd messed everything up, begging her to help me find you. Before Nathan could respond, alarms blared from the NICU. They ran, following the sound to Christopher's incubator where medical staff were already gathering. His oxygen levels dropped suddenly, Dr. Phillips explained, her voice calm but urgent. We need to reintubate. Nathan felt his knees buckle. Richard's hand gripped his shoulder, steadying him as they watched the medical team work. Breathe, son, Richard whispered. He's a fighter, like his grandmother. Minutes stretched like hours until finally, Christopher's monitors showed stable readings again. Dr. Phillips approached, her face serious. This is normal for preemies, she assured them. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But we need to discuss some things. His current treatment plan, the specialized medications and equipment. Cost isn't an issue, Richard interrupted. Dad? Nathan started to protest. No. Richard's voice was firm. You can reject my help with the coffee shop. You can keep your distance personally. But I will not stand by and watch my grandson suffer because of pride. Yours or mine. The words hung between them, heavy with truth and challenge. Olivia wheeled herself into the tense scene, immediately sensing the conflict. What did I miss? Your father-in-law and husband are having a Miller moment, Rose observed from her usual corner chair, knitting needles clicking steadily. Stubborn men trying to outstubborn each other while a baby needs them both. Her blunt assessment cut through the tension. Nathan looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw the same fear in Richard's eyes that he felt in his own heart. Okay, Nathan said finally, but I want to understand everything. Every treatment, every decision. We'll learn together, Richard agreed. That evening, after Christopher had stabilized and Olivia was resting, Nathan found himself in the hospital chapel. He hadn't been in one since his mother's funeral. I'm trying, Mom, he whispered to the empty room. But it's hard. Every time I start to trust him, I remember how you looked when you were sick, how he wasn't there. But he's here now. Nathan turned to find Rose in the doorway, her ever-present knitting in hand. You know what the hardest part of knitting is? She asked, settling into a pew. Not the complicated patterns or the tiny stitches, it's fixing mistakes. Sometimes you have to unravel everything you've done to make it right. Doesn't mean the yarn is bad, just that the pattern needs work. Did my mother send you to be our guardian angel? Nathan asked, only half joking. Rose smiled mysteriously. Catherine and I had our talks back when she was sick. She knew what was coming. Made me promise to watch over her boys. All of them. In the NICU, Richard sat beside Christopher's incubator, one hand pressed against the clear wall. The babies, chest rose and fell steadily now, each breath a small victory. I'm trying too, Cat, he whispered. I'm trying to be the father he needs, the grandfather this little one deserves. Help me get it right this time. A soft knock drew his attention. Nathan stood in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. Mom always said everything looks better after good coffee, he offered, extending 1 cup. Richard accepted it with trembling hands. She also said life's too short for bad coffee, which is why Hope & Co. will only serve the best. Nathan pulled up a chair beside his father. Tell me about when you and Mom first met. I want Christopher to know his grandmother's whole story. As the night deepened outside the hospital windows, father and son sat vigil beside a tiny incubator, sharing memories and coffee, while Rose's blue blanket grew stitch by stitch in the corner, a tangible symbol of family being knit back together, one careful thread at a time. 3 weeks after Christopher's birth, Hope & Co.'ers was taking shape in downtown Mountain View. The autumn wind carried the scent of fresh paint and sawdust through the open doors as workers installed the custom-built coffee bar. Nathan stood in the center of the space, Catherine's restored portrait carefully wrapped in his arms. A little to the left, Olivia directed from her seat near the fireplace, still moving gingerly from her C-section recovery. We want the morning light to hit it just right. The portrait found its home above the stone hearth. Catherine's laughing face would be the first thing customers saw when they entered. Nathan stepped back, emotions catching in his throat, as he watched the sunlight dance across his mother's frozen smile. Perfect placement, Richard's voice came from the doorway. He carried Christopher's car seat in one hand and a thick folder in the other. The baby, finally released from the NICU 2 days ago, slept peacefully, bundled in Rose's blue blanket. The contractors need final approval on the kitchen equipment. Richard continued, setting the car seat carefully beside Olivia. And the coffee roaster arrives tomorrow. Already? Nathan turned, surprised. That order was supposed to take another month. Richard looked slightly guilty. I might have made some calls, called in some favors. The old resentment flickered briefly. The wealthy father throwing money and influence around, but Nathan tamped it down. They'd agreed to try for Christopher's sake. Thanks, Dad, he managed. That actually helps a lot. Richard's face lit up at the casual use of Dad, a recent development that still felt fragile and new. The moment was interrupted by Christopher's angry wail. Olivia reached for him, but Richard was closer. May I? He asked, already unfastening the car seat straps with practiced ease. The tenderness with which the powerful businessman lifted his grandson still startled Nathan. Someone needs a change, Richard announced, heading for the newly installed family bathroom. Come on, champ, Grandpa's got you. Olivia caught Nathan's expression. Still feels surreal, doesn't it? Watching him be so human. Nathan supplied, then sighed. Yeah. Sometimes I forget he was like this once, back when Mom was alive. Speaking of your mother, Olivia hesitated. Victoria called the house yesterday. Nathan's body went rigid. His father's former mistress, his mother's former best friend, the woman whose actions had shattered their family, had been notably absent since Christopher's birth. What did she want? To apologize. She's heard about Christopher, about you and your father reconnecting. She said she wants to make amends. Before Nathan could respond, Richard returned with a freshly changed and contentedly cooing Christopher. He's definitely got the Miller appetite, Richard reported proudly. Strong grip too, grabbed my tie and wouldn't let go. Seeing his father so natural with his son, Nathan made a decision. Victoria called. Richard froze, his smile fading. Christopher, sensing the tension, began to fuss. She wants to apologize, Nathan continued, to make amends. No. Richard's voice was hard. She doesn't get to be part of this, not after what she did to your mother. What you both did, Nathan corrected quietly. The truth hung heavy in the room. Christopher's cries grew louder, echoing off the unfinished walls. Here, Olivia intervened, taking the baby. He's probably hungry. I'll feed him in the office. As she left, Rose appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by the family crisis. She carried a basket of muffins and her latest knitting project. Seems like a good time for comfort food and hard truths, she announced, setting up camp in one of the newly delivered armchairs. Rose, Richard began, this is a private family matter. Hush. She waved away his objection. I've earned my place in this family through tears and prayers and more midnight vigils than I care to count. Now sit, both of you. To Nathan's amazement, his father obeyed, sinking into the chair opposite Rose. Nathan perched on the edge of the coffee bar. Victoria's sins are between her and God, Rose said firmly. Just like yours, Richard, and yours, Nathan. My sins? Nathan protested. Pride, child. Holding on to anger until it poisons everything it touches. Your mother understood. This? Why do you think she forgave them both? She shouldn't have had to forgive anyone, Nathan argued. No, she shouldn't have, Rose agreed. But she chose to because she understood something you're both still learning. Forgiveness isn't about deserving it. It's about breaking the chains that bind us to pain. In the office, they could hear Christopher's cries subsiding as Olivia sang softly to him. Your mother's last words to me, Rose continued, were about you both. She said, make sure my boys find their way back to each other. And when Victoria finally breaks under the weight of her guilt, tell them that forgiveness sets both sides free. Richard's hands trembled as he covered his face. I never deserved Catherine's forgiveness. No, you didn't, Rose agreed bluntly. Just like you didn't deserve a second chance with your son and grandson. But you got both because love is bigger than deserving. Nathan stared at his mother's portrait, remembering her last days. How even in pain she'd made sure everyone else was cared for. How she'd made him promise to be happy, to live fully, to love without reservation. One condition, he said, finally. If we agree to hear Victoria out, it happens here, under Mom's picture, so she can see exactly what she helped break and what we're trying to rebuild. Richard looked up at Catherine's smiling face. She'd like that. The symmetry of it. Healing happening in the place you built to honor her. From the office, Olivia emerged with a sleeping Christopher. The baby's peaceful face, so like Catherine's in sleep, seemed to soften something in both men's hearts. Next week, Nathan decided. After the grand opening. Mom always said new beginnings deserve their own space to breathe. Rose nodded approvingly, her knitting needles clicking in a steady rhythm. She was working on a new blanket, this one in a pattern of interlocking circles that looked surprisingly like coffee rings. Life's like coffee, you know, she mused. Sometimes bitter, sometimes sweet, but always better when shared with those we love. Richard stood slowly, moving to the portrait. We're trying, Kat, he whispered. We're all trying. The afternoon, sun slanted through Hope & Co.'s windows, casting long shadows that seemed to connect them all. Father, son, grandson, and the spirit of the woman who'd loved them enough to pave the way for redemption. Outside, the sign painter was finishing the gold leaf lettering on the front window, Hope & Co., where every cup tells a story. Their story was still being written, one difficult conversation at a time, but at least now they were all holding the pen together. Hope & Co.'s grand opening had been a success. The local paper praised its artisanal approach to coffee and healing, picking up on the subtle tributes to Catherine throughout the space. But now, a week later, the cafe was closed early for a different kind of healing. Victoria Lawrence stood outside the front door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. At 54, she still carried herself with the elegant poise that had once made her Catherine's closest friend. But years of guilt had etched deep lines around her eyes. Through the window, she could see them waiting. Nathan at the coffee bar, methodically preparing drinks as if it were any other day. Richard in an armchair beneath Catherine's portrait holding baby Christopher. Olivia arranging Rose's fresh-baked cookies on a tray. The family she had helped destroy, now rebuilt without her. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. The sound seemed to freeze everyone in place. You came, Rose said from her usual corner. Knitting needles paused mid-stitch. She was the only one who moved to greet Victoria, offering a gentle hug that made the other woman's composure crack slightly. I wasn't sure I should, Victoria admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Sit, Rose directed, guiding her to the chair furthest from Richard and the baby. Nathan's going to make coffee, because that's what his mother would have done, and we're all going to talk like the adults Catherine believed we could be. Nathan's hands moved automatically through the familiar ritual of coffee preparation. The grinder's whir filled the uncomfortable silence as he measured beans from a special blend, one he'd created years ago, inspired by his mother's favorite flavors. Pour over, he announced quietly, setting cups in front of each person. Mom always said it forced people to slow down, to be present in the moment. Victoria's hands shook as she accepted her cup, her eyes fixed on Catherine's portrait. She taught me that, how to appreciate the ritual of coffee, how to find peace in small moments. Before or after you betrayed her? Nathan's voice was sharp. Nathan? Olivia warned softly, but Victoria held up a hand. No, he has every right to his anger. I destroyed something precious, something I can never repair. She turned to face Nathan fully. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here because your mother made me promise something the last time I saw her, and I've been too much of a coward to keep that promise until now. Richard shifted in his chair, Christopher stirring against his chest. The last time you saw her, but you weren't at the hospital? No. Victoria's voice cracked. It was 2 weeks before the end. She called me to her garden, said she needed to speak with me while she still had the strength. The memory seemed to physically pain her. She reached into her purse with trembling fingers, withdrawing an envelope yellowed with age. She gave me this, said I would know when it was time to deliver it. Victoria placed the envelope on the coffee table. When I heard about Christopher, about this place, about you all finding your way back to each other, I knew it was time. Nathan stared at the envelope, his mother's distinctive handwriting clearly visible. For my boys, when they're ready to hear the truth. Read it, Rose encouraged gently. Your mother's been waiting a long time to have her final say. Richard's hands trembled so badly that Olivia had to take Christopher. Nathan picked up the envelope, breaking the seal with careful fingers. My dearest boys, he began reading, his voice catching on the familiar endearment. If you're reading this, then something beautiful has begun to grow from the ashes of our family's hardest moment. I need you to understand some things about love, forgiveness, and the choices we make when facing the end. Nathan had to stop, emotion overwhelming him. Rose took the letter, continuing in her steady voice. Richard, my love, your greatest sin wasn't the affair. It was letting fear drive you away when I needed you most. But I forgave you because I saw the prison of guilt you built around yourself, and I knew our son would need you once I was gone. Nathan, my brave boy, your father is a flawed man who made terrible mistakes, but he loves you with the same fierce devotion you'll soon feel for your own child. Don't let his sins become your burden to carry. Victoria, my oldest friend, your betrayal cut deepest because you were my sister in all but blood. But I forgave you too because I saw how your own pain and loneliness led you to grasp at a love that wasn't yours to claim. I'm asking all of you to do something harder than forgiveness. I'm asking you to learn to love again, to risk being hurt, to build something new from the pieces of what was broken. Rose paused, letting the words settle in the quiet cafe. Christopher cooed softly, reaching toward the sunlight streaming through the windows. There's a coffee shop in Milan, Rose continued reading, where Richard first told me he loved me. The owner there taught me that every perfect cup of coffee is about transformation, taking something bitter and making it into something beautiful. That's what I want for all of you. Take this bitterness and transform it. Build something beautiful. Nathan, whatever you're building when this letter finds you, make it a place of healing. Richard, be the father I always knew you could be. Victoria, find the friend you used to be before fear and guilt distorted you. I love you all, even now, even knowing how this story ends, or perhaps begins again. All my love, Catherine. The letter fell silent, but Catherine's presence seemed to fill the room, as tangible as the coffee's aroma and the afternoon light. Victoria was crying quietly, years of carefully maintained composure finally breaking. I've missed her every day, missed who I was when I was worthy of her friendship. Richard stood abruptly, passing Christopher to Nathan. Without a word, he walked out the front door into the crisp autumn air. Let him go, Rose advised as Nathan moved to follow. Some healing needs solitude first. Victoria gathered her purse, preparing to leave, but Nathan's voice stopped her. Mom's favorite, he said, gesturing to the coffee cup in front of her. The blend. I could never get it quite right. Indonesian base with Ethiopian beans for brightness, Victoria said softly. She always said the secret was in the roasting temperature. Nathan's hands clenched on the counter. Show me? It was a tiny olive branch, but in Catherine's spirit of transformation, perhaps it was enough to begin with. Outside, Richard stood beneath the cafe's sign, tears flowing freely as he finally, fully grieved the woman who had loved him enough to pave the way for his redemption. Above him, the words Hope & Co. gleamed in the setting sun, each letter a promise of possibility. 6 months after Catherine's letter changed everything, Hope & Co. had become the heart of Mountain View's community. The morning sun streamed through windows dressed for Christmas, casting warm light on the busy cafe where every table told a story of healing. Victoria sat in her usual corner, teaching a young barista the art of proper bean selection. Her weekly coffee workshops had become so popular that Nathan had made her a permanent consultant, turning her guilt into purpose. Though some wounds would never fully heal, they had found a way to honor Catherine's memory through shared passion. Richard entered through the front door, snowflakes melting on his casual sweater, a far cry from his former suited armor. Christopher, now a robust 7-month-old, squealed with delight in his arms, reaching for the twinkling lights that decorated the space. "There's my boy," Olivia called from behind the counter, where she was arranging Rose's famous Christmas cookies. Her own baby bump was just beginning to show, a spring surprise that had brought tears of joy to everyone's eyes. "Both your boys," Richard corrected with a gentle smile, passing Christopher to his mother. Time had softened his edges, transformed him from the cold hotel magnate into someone who looked remarkably like the man in the old photos Catherine had treasured. Nathan emerged from the roasting room, the scent of fresh beans clinging to his clothes. "Dad, perfect timing. I think I finally got it right." He led Richard to the coffee bar, where 2 cups of steaming liquid awaited. The special blend they'd been working on for months, a tribute to Catherine that had become their bridge to healing. Richard took a careful sip, closing his eyes. When he opened them, they shined with tears. "That's it. That's exactly how she used to make it." Victoria helped with the roasting temperature, Nathan admitted, no longer finding it painful to speak her name. Said Mom always trusted the beans to tell her when they were ready. Rose looked up from her knitting, a yellow blanket for the new baby, and smiled knowingly. Catherine always did say the best things in life couldn't be rushed. Had to. Let them develop in their own time. The cafe door chimed again as Uncle James arrived, carrying an old photo album he'd discovered in his attic. "Found some pictures you might want to see," he announced, setting it on the counter. They gathered around, Christopher babbling happily in Nathan's arms, as James opened the album. There was Catherine in her college years, sitting in that Milan cafe where it all began. Richard beside her, young and unguarded, looking at her like she was his whole world. "I remember that day," Richard said softly. "She was explaining the chemistry behind the perfect espresso pull. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I could have listened forever." "That's how she got me too," Victoria added from her corner. Her passion for the smallest details made everything feel magical. Nathan traced the photograph with gentle fingers. "She would have loved this place." "She does love it," Rose corrected firmly. "Every cup served, every laugh shared, every moment of healing, she's part of all of it." As if in agreement, Christopher reached toward Catherine's portrait above the fireplace, his tiny fingers opening and closing in greeting. "You know," Olivia said, one hand resting on her growing belly, "we haven't discussed names for this little one yet." Nathan and Richard exchanged a look. "If it's a girl," Nathan began. "Catherine," they said in unison. Victoria wiped tears from her eyes as she stood to leave. "I should go. The Christmas rush will be starting soon." "Stay," Nathan said quietly. "Help me teach Dad how to make Mom's gingerbread latte. He's finally ready to learn." The invitation, to stay, to teach, to be part of this healing, hung in the air like the scent of fresh coffee. Victoria sank back into her chair, acceptance and gratitude warring on her face. Richard moved behind the counter, rolling up his sleeves with determination. "Your mother always said I was hopeless in the kitchen." "She also said love made the best teacher," Rose reminded him, setting aside her knitting to watch. As Nathan began explaining the process to his father, Olivia caught sight of a familiar figure through the window. An elderly woman was studying the cafe's sign, her face brightening with recognition. "Isn't that," she started. "The owner of the Milan Cafe," Richard finished, amazement in his voice. "The one who taught Catherine everything." Nathan hurried to open the door, welcoming the woman who had unknowingly set this whole story in motion decades ago. She entered slowly, taking in the space with knowing eyes. When she reached Catherine's portrait, she smiled. "Ah, la mia studentessa preferita," she said softly. She told me one day her son would build something beautiful. Christopher, as if sensing the significance of the moment, reached for the old woman with complete trust. She took him with practiced ease, studying his face. "He has her spirit," she declared in accented English. "La stessa luz," the same light. The cafe seemed to hold its breath as she carried Christopher to the coffee bar. "Now," she said to Richard and Nathan, her eyes twinkling, "let me show you how your Catherine learned to make coffee sing." As the afternoon light painted shadows across the wooden floors, 3 generations gathered around the coffee bar, learning and teaching, remembering and creating. Rose knitted quietly in her corner, adding another stitch to the tapestry of this healing family. Outside, snow began to fall, each flake a tiny miracle of transformation. Inside Hope and Comer's, where every cup told a story, Catherine's legacy lived on in the laughter of her grandson, the love of her son, the redemption of her husband, and the forgiveness that had finally set them all free. The cafe's sign glowed warmly in the gathering dusk. Hope and Comer, where every cup tells a story. But now everyone knew it wasn't just about coffee. It was about family, forgiveness, and the kind of love that, like the perfect roast, only grows richer with time. 5 years later, the summer morning light streamed through Hope & Co.'s expanded windows, catching the silver in Richard Miller's hair as he chased 2 giggling children around the cafe's new reading nook. Christopher, now an energetic 5-year-old with his grandmother's curls, led the charge, while his sister Catherine, 4, followed with determinedly wobbly steps, her red pigtails bouncing. "Grandpa, you're too slow," Christopher called out, diving behind one of the overstuffed armchairs beneath his grandmother's portrait. "Never too slow for tickles." Richard caught little Catherine, sweeping her into his arms as her laughter echoed through the space. The stern hotel magnate had long since been replaced by a doting grandfather, who measured wealth in children's smiles rather than stock portfolios. Olivia watched from behind the counter, one hand resting on her newest baby bump. Their 3rd child, due in winter. The cafe had become everything they'd dreamed and more, expanding to include a small chain of Hope and Cumber locations across the mountain towns, each maintaining the intimate, healing atmosphere of the original. The Milano Room, their new private event space, and was currently occupied by Victoria's advanced coffee workshop. Through the glass walls, they could see her teaching proper cupping techniques to an attentive audience, her silver hair elegantly styled, her movements confident. Time and purpose had helped her find her way back to herself, though she still paused to touch Catherine's portrait each morning, a quiet ritual of remembrance and gratitude. Nathan emerged from the roasting room, carrying a fresh batch of their signature blend, Catherine's Light, now famous throughout Colorado. The beans came directly from the Milan cafe owner's family farm, creating a connection across generations and continents. "Mail came," he announced, setting down the beans. Rose's latest postcard. Their elderly neighbor had finally agreed to travel after her 80th birthday, visiting every coffee-growing region she'd ever dreamed of. Her knitting needles now clicked in cafes around the world, though she always returned to her corner chair at Hope & Co., claiming no other place felt quite like home. Richard settled into an armchair with both grandchildren, accepting the postcard Nathan offered. "Says here she's in Ethiopia, learning traditional coffee ceremonies." "She's braver than all of us," Olivia smiled, remembering how Rose's quiet strength had helped heal their family. The cafe door chimed as Uncle James arrived for his daily visit, carrying a familiar leather-bound journal. "Found another one of Catherine's old recipe books," he announced. "This one has her original notes on cold brew ratios." Christopher scrambled down from Richard's lap. "Can we make some, Dad, please?" "After your piano lesson," Nathan promised. Music had become another bridge between generations. Christopher taking lessons on Catherine's restored piano, which now sat in the Milano Room. Little Catherine tugged at her grandfather's sleeve. "Tell the story again," she pleaded. "About Grandma and the coffee shop in Milan. That's the 3rd time this week. Richard chuckled, but his eyes softened as they always did when speaking of his late wife. Some stories get better with each telling, Victoria said softly from the doorway of the Milano room. Just like some blends improve with time. The children settled in for the familiar tale, while Nathan prepared a round of Catherine's Light for the adults. Each cup was served in one of the handmade mugs they'd commissioned for the 5th anniversary of Hope & Co., each one inscribed with Catherine's favorite saying, "Love, like coffee, is about transformation." Above them, Catherine's portrait seemed to smile more brightly in the morning sun, watching over her growing family as they continued to write new chapters in the story she'd helped begin. The bitter grounds of past pain had been transformed cup by cup and day by day into something beautiful, just as she'd always believed they could be. Outside, the mountains stood eternal against the summer sky, while inside, hope and comer love continued to brew, growing richer and deeper with each passing season. If you were Nathan, would you be able to forgive your father and welcome him back into your life after discovering he had betrayed your dying mother's trust? Or would the weight of past betrayals be too heavy to overcome, even for the sake of your own child's future? Think about a moment in your own life where you had to choose between holding on to pain or embracing the possibility of healing. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.